Some say it was in the pit villages that family life was at its strongest. People shared a common heritage. The row upon row of back-to-backs here in the Northumberland coalfield brought families close together, where everyone looked out for each other.
I was surrounded by relatives. My grandfather had two brothers, and each of the two brothers had very large families, so everywhere I went there were aunts and uncles and cousins on the street, and lots of neighbours. One of the things I remember was my Aunt Ruth, who's not actually my aunt, it was my mum's aunt, but everybody called her the Aunt Ruth, and she celebrated her 50th wedding anniversary, and the whole family got into this tiny room in the pit cottage that they lived in for a tea. One of the things that the Aunt Ruth was well known for was winning the annual beauty competition in the over 60s club that met in the village hall. And apparently she won this event every year and upset some of the others as far as I remember. She was a very well turned out lady. She was quite well known. She liked a drop of whiskey, was a regular visitor in the working men's club. She had her own seat in her own corner. Quite a well known lady.
But Keith led a double life. He had family links in the picture postcard West Country. Here in its winding lanes he'd spend every summer. It could not have been more different from his home in the pit village of Hazelrig. Before motorways, it took a good 12 hours of driving in the family camper van to make the 300-mile journey.
I always thought that I was privileged and slightly different in that my family came from the south of England as well as from the north, and I was able to enjoy both sets of family. And in the summer of each year, from when I was about 7 years old, we would go down to the West Country where we came from, and I would mix with people down there and play in the village and in the farmyard and have a very different sort of playground to that I'd had at Hazelrig. East Coker in Somerset was certainly a chocolate box village. The houses were very, very old, over 1,000 years old perhaps, and the thatched cottages. The pub was where my father grew up. His father, my grandfather, was the publican there in the early 20s.
Old family friends would often take young Keith under their wings. The timelessness of village life was only occasionally disturbed by the mischievous grown-ups letting their hair down.
We used to build what we called chassis. Some people would call them a bogey. Anything you could put together out of using pram wheels and scrap wood. I cobbled one up out of bits and pieces out of the barn, and the family then took it over and decided to wreck it. My mother, I think, was probably the ringleader. She was well aware of how to use a bogey, and she incited Mrs. Best, the farmer's wife, and her daughter to have a go. And I remember just how my job was just to simply keep repairing it and put it back together again. I just thought they should give it back to the kids. They were far too heavy. They shouldn't be playing on kids' toys.